Let's skip to Trump because I want to get a sense of where we are at today. I mean, you started this talk by saying we were in trouble, but what does that really mean? And what are the things that are sort of I mean, I think the dusting off the Espionage Act on journalists who are getting leaked information, which I think at the time, but certainly in hindsight, could not be construed as espionage. I mean, I don't think it should have been at the time, but it's also sort of like these leaks were not so damaging that you could even argue. Never mind the dynamic of espionage, you can't even argue the implications of espionage, right? There's no damages here, as far as
right, yeah. It's sort of espionage as we tend to think of it as like you're giving the information to the enemy.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some, and that the information is would be problematic if given to the enemy, and exactly. And none of that seems to have been the case. But let's talk about that relationship with Trump. But I'm also curious from the end of from the side of the press side, it's a radically different press today than say 20 years ago, because of technology and both social media and the what's happened to the news business.
Oh, it's definitely true. So now any of us can really be our own publisher, our own podcaster, or social media influencer. So rather than the president dealing with a few dozen journalists in the White House press corps who might be covering them, now there's literally probably tens of thousands of people who are writing or broadcasting things on a daily basis about the president. So it's much harder for the president to control what the press is doing, although easier for a president to reach the public directly through their own social media channels. But where I think we're really in the most danger, Sam, is I would say in two ways. One is the degree of hostility towards a free press that we see today, certainly heightened during the Trump era, but still continuing, especially among some circles in the Republican Party, but also among people on the left and Democrats as well. This great hostility towards the press, which the press should be checked, the press should be criticized, but the fundamental role of a press in a democracy should not be ignored. And we see what happens in dictatorships is the first thing they try to do is clamp down on the media, clamp down on journalism. And we're in a real danger point, I think, in terms of the media outlets that do try to present verified factual information are ignored because of that hostility. And the people who scream the loudest and exaggerate the most and trade in the biggest conspiracy theories are the ones who are getting the clicks and the likes and are spreading a lot of dangerous information. I think that's one thing. The other big danger, and we can talk in more detail about it if you want, is the decline in local news. We've got more than 1,000 communities now that have no local news outlet. And this is the bread and butter of people's daily existence. What their local taxes are their streets getting paved? What's going on with police and fire and so forth? And a lot of studies show that corruption increases when there's not local news coverage. Taxes increase when there's not good local news coverage, and the perspective of communities around the country, I think, is lost, and we tend to also end up with the big media in Washington, the big media in New York, presenting their perspective on things, and we're losing the perspective of what's going on in towns across America as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge thing, and I think it's warrants. It's probably its own show, frankly, the demise of the local. But let me ask you this, just in terms of that first part that you said, the tremendous amount of sources of information, much of which is inaccurate, sometimes purposely so, and sometimes not. The Biden administration tried to, and they just, as of today, abandoned, it appears, to create some. It's really unclear to me what it is. I mean, frankly, and I've tried to read about what it is, but I'm trying to think of what they specifically called. It was a board created in the DHS, the Disinformation Governance Board. And the board, according to them, was created to study best practices in combating the harmful effects of disinformation and to help DHS counter viral lies and propaganda that could threaten domestic security. I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what all the words mean, and I can take little phrases and understand, but I don't study best practices in combating, what are they actually going to do? It was unclear, I think. And there was a lot of pushback. A lot of it was, sort of, I think, bad faith pushback. But on the other hand, I don't read this and feel good about it. That this board is going to do something good. Talk to us to the extent that you know about that board, and what your sense is. If that is not the solution, what is the solution?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It was hard to understand what the board was going to do and exactly what problem it was trying to address. And I think the intent of creating the board might have been a good idea, and there's certainly a strong need for it. But I think the Biden administration didn't do the groundwork necessary to explain why it was creating the board, just exactly what the problem the board was going to address was, and really making a case to the public about why it was needed before the blowback started. Because as we all know, there's a huge problem with disinformation. Example, in April 2020, the early days of COVID, the Facebook post from the top 10 health sites was 70 million. And the Facebook post got 70 million views. The Facebook post from the top 10 conspiracy COVID sites got 300 million views, more than 4 times as much. So there's a real danger from disinformation, and that disinformation kind of played out through the COVID crisis. I think trying to do it through a government agency may not be the right way to do it. I think there could be changes in what's known as Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act. You're probably familiar with that, where the social media tech companies have no liability for disinformation that they spread, no liability if they are spreading libelous information. In the same way, any newspaper that's publishing something that's libelous faces a lawsuit for it. Any broadcast station faces a lawsuit for that. But the social media companies at this point bear no responsibility for that in terms of the law. I think that's something that could be tightened if the social media companies don't do it themselves, which I think would probably be the best ways if they took it upon themselves to really seriously take on disinformation. But if they don't, Congress could certainly act and do it that way.
Yeah, I frankly am for a tightening of 230. I think you can do that by basically saying, if you have this many impressions per month or per year, you have a higher level of responsibility. I mean, frankly, I'm not going to. I don't think it's reasonable for us to manage the comments at the Majority Report site, frankly. But I think when you start talking about 30 million views or 300 million views, you have a different level of responsibility.
Right.
I think for these things.
And a lot of it, Sam, is also being transparent about what their algorithms do, because as we've learned from some of the leaks from Facebook, is the algorithms were programmed to reward the most controversial things, right. The most disingenuous things, and that got us partly to where we are today. The European Union has passed things to force Google and Facebook and others to be more transparent about exactly what their algorithms are rewarding. And I think that would be another way to get at it, is if they're not more transparent, tighten that Section 230.
I'm completely down with that. The book is Clash: Presidents and the Press in Times of Crisis by John Marshall. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Much appreciated for your time today.
Sam and Emma, thank you for having me on. It's been great.
Thanks so much.